to school, they can go to college. You do not get a green card. For a green card, you still have to make sure you follow the rules that are in this country. So it's a good way of getting it, but I thought I like Warren Buffett's idea much better. How about you?
I don't know. I mean, I'm torn because at the same time, you see what's happening with our immigration debate. I mean, if you're watching these presidential debates, candidate debates, then you know how much of a hot button topic this is. You know, people are debating whether or not we should hand out citizenship when a baby is born here on U.S. soil.
Yes.
Right? And here you're talking about giving a pathway for citizenship, at least a green card status for people who come here just because they have the means to buy property. So what happens? You do something like this, and next thing you know, you have a huge flood of people from China and India.
And they are already coming.
They're already coming, but now you've got basically the floodgates are open. What do you think these communities are going to do if they're already troubled by the immigration pattern? You're just exacerbating this by making it easier.
Well, I want to tell you that the foreigners like the Canadians, the Chinese, the Indians, by the way, these three communities are the major buyers of real estate. 5.5% of the real estate sold in Florida was actually sold to these three communities. I mean, it is, the foreigners are coming in, they're going to buy, and they will say, oh, you want to sell the citizenship? There is something not kosher with it.
I agree with that. I mean, aren't you taking the disadvantaged Americans who have a hard time staying in their homes and giving them even a further disadvantage? You're basically saying, well, it's too bad. You might be a citizen, but since you can't afford the house, we're going to give it to somebody coming over from anywhere else in the world because they have the money.
No,
I don't know about that.
The idea will be, so far there's 1% of millionaires and billionaires. Well, with Schumer's bill, we'll get 2% of millionaires and billionaires.
Yes, and will they all be paying taxes?
That I don't know. If they're not allowed to work, no, they will not. But if they bring the investments, that's good dollars, you know.
I don't know. Housing is kind of a touchy topic.
Yes.
Folks, how is this for a story? I just couldn't believe it when I read it. Did you know so many of the executives that are at these top technology companies like Google, Apple, Yahoo, Hewlett-Packard, eBay, the children of those executives go to a very small school called the Waldorf School of the Peninsula. There's only 160 of these schools, and they only have 200 children each. And this is the best part. The children are not allowed to use calculators, computers, or any other kind of technology. This is a pretty old concept. The Waldorf School is nearly a century old, and they stick to the old philosophies, right? Blackboards with colorful chalk, bookshelves with encyclopedias, wooden desks filled with workbooks and number 2 pencils. You remember number 2 pencils?
And you have to write.
You have to write. Actually, the school's chief teaching tools are anything but high tech. They only use pens and paper, knitting needles, and occasionally mud. There's not a computer anywhere to be found. In fact, the school even frowns upon the students doing any kind of homework on their computers at home.
Wow.
The idea being that, you really want to use old-fashioned principles to try to get students to learn. Those who endorse this approach say computers inhibit creative thinking, movement, human interaction, and attention spans. And that's why the children in the United States and in many modern nations are suffering, whereas the kids in Asia and so forth are doing so well, because there's still a whole lot of human interaction that occurs, and that's really the way the human brain was designed to learn. So isn't that amazing that the kids of many of these technology executives go to this very little known school and they do things in a very old, rustic, old-fashioned way, and yet it seems to be working.
More things change, more they remain the same.
More they stay the same.
University of California, Los Angeles, has decided that they want to take their business school private.
Huh.
But they don't call it private because the minute you say private, it's a state property. 150 years, the state has supported that particular business school, so they don't want to go it private, but self-sufficient. The reason they want to be self-sufficient is because, the salaries of the professors have to be approved at a number of different levels in the state or in the city, wherever it is located. So what they are doing is, hey, we need to be raising salaries of our professors. We need to be able to charge more money. You remember we did a story on University of Virginia, Darden Business School? 40% of the students in the University of Virginia come from China, India, and other places. They charge them $56,000 as tuition. Did you know, and I didn't know this, that a year and a half ago, University of Virginia was given the title of self-sufficient. They do not get a single dollar from the state, the state government. They produce their own money, their own income, and they spend it the way they want to. So this seems to be a new trend. Take over the state colleges and make them private.
I don't know that I like that trend. I mean, the problem is our state budgets are so bankrupt that there's very little money left to fund some of these schools. And of course, how are these schools ever supposed to stay at the top of their game if they can't recruit and bring high caliber faculty in, which is an expensive thing?
Yeah.
So you have to find new sources of revenue. But the minute you start hiking up tuition and going the private route, you're not allowing so many of these students to have access to these schools. So it becomes basically for the rich, for those that have the means.
That's right.
They're the only ones that can go to school. And therefore, you increase that divide between the rich and the poor. Those who are stuck in their economic circumstances can't even educate themselves out of their economic conditions, which is a sad, sad thing.
That's why you need to like Rick Perry, who called all the deans and all the regents of all the universities of Texas and given them a marching order. I want $10,000 and nothing more in tuition for an undergraduate student. I mean, that's the kind of person you like, right?
I mean, what would happen in this model is you would take all these state universities and colleges, which are very, very reputable. They all go the private route to become self-sufficient. Meanwhile, it's the community colleges that are hoisting up the rest of this country to try to give people a college education. And what happens? The rich stay rich, the poor stay poor, and you have this huge divide in the middle. I just don't see this as being a good trend at all. Well, folks, as you're watching the financial news, here's one to keep an eye on in the coming days. November 4th is the target date for Groupon to do its IPO. Now, you've seen Groupon, I'm sure you're on their email circulars, but Groupon is actually attracting a lot of attention for a couple of reasons. One, they are trying to raise $52 billion with their IPO, which is one of the largest pileups of deals in decades. So this is actually huge. And the reality is our financial circumstances have really restricted these IPOs in the last couple of years. You haven't seen that many. There have just been 2 IPOs since mid-August, and they really weren't getting all that much buzz. The other reason why this one is important to watch is Groupon is the latest to cut its expected price range to lure investors. So in other words, you're not going to see them start at $200 because you're not going to get a lot of investors with prices that high. Cutting the expected range to between $16 to $18 a share would give the company a value of $11.2 billion, and you'd probably raise between 20 to 30, luring new investors in. So this is actually a very, very positive sign for the economy. And in fact, how this IPO does will be a big marker for how the U.S. economy is
I remember when Google came out. Folks, Google came out at something like a $45 or $50, and then immediately started going to $500. And Groupon probably, I don't know.